Hi everyone. So for this devlog, I added 2 new game mechanics, and I also made some changes to existing systems, improvements I would say. For example, allowing multiple particle squares to run on the same entity at the same time, and also not doing an attack when I click on a UI element, and a few other things like that. So the first thing I want to show is this new icon here, and this is for the levels panel. And there's a theme here, which is this video is going to be full of a lot of crappy icons. Just know they'll be replaced in the future. They're just placeholders for right now. Uh-oh, hold on 1 second. Let me kill this thing. Okay, so when I open the levels panel, you'll see some of the skills and their levels. And I just actually gained XP from killing this orc and some defense. But as we can see here, I have this faction level, and this is just hard-coded now for an example. In the future, I think faction level will be a level that everyone will share in a faction, and it will gatekeep some of the maybe gear or crafting resources or whatever the case. I haven't thought about it too deeply, but I know I want some flavor of that mechanics. I think that's pretty cool. Here's some other skills, and the only ones I have working now are strength, defense, and range. I don't have the systems for fire, nature, or any of the other elements, and also don't have pets, but I know I want that in the future. So strength and range kind of work how you expect. You do damage to something, you get experience, as opposed to other games where you have to kill something to get experience. I kind of like the idea of actually getting experience as you do something. Defense is a little different. For example, in RuneScape, you would equip an item or equip a weapon with an attack style that has defense, and you would gain experience attacking with that weapon. In this case, I actually like the idea of, let's show you this, getting experience by getting hit by something. Now I know this could probably be abused in some way, but I'll try to figure that out in the future. But I think this is really cool. And we're going to approach a level increase, and you'll see there's a nice little particle effect that happens as you increase level. And let's see if I can kill this and get a sword or a bow. Yeah, turn this off. Good, I got a sword. So the next mechanic I want to show, and again, crappy icons coming. So here is the gear panel. So this panel holds all of your gear slots. So I had to add a system to actually equip weapons and change the combat mechanics based on the weapon. This is also nice because then I added weapon stats, which are then used to calculate damage, which I'll show later in the devlog. So you can click and equipped and unequipped. And now you'll see if I turn these off, I start doing quite a bit more damage to these. Oh, I got a bow too. I can start doing quite a bit more damage, and I will start getting a lot more XP. So we can see now I can switch between my bow and my sword. So let's see if I can get some range experience. Range is a little hard right now to hit things, but I'm hitting 2s. As I level, I'll start hitting a bit higher. And again, I'll show how the damage is calculated. And I'll show the XP. So now you can see I've got some range XP, strength XP, and defense XP. And these are the basics for the mechanics that I've added. In the future, I'm going to add even more to this. For example, I can add more skills. Even here, I have the ability to add 6 more pretty easily. And I have some in mind, but just adding the back end to all of them takes time. So anyways, now I'll show the design. So I'm going to start with the client code, and I'm not going to show the gear panel as I don't think that's super interesting. I think what's more interesting is the levels panel, as it has more UI elements, and it also has a bit more complex code when it comes to synchronizing the server values with the UI itself. So first I create the panel, and remember these are in screen space, or the relative to screen space I should say, and then I have this little helper function to create rows, and these rows are based on sort of a grid, so I can add new rows very easily based on if I get new skills. So I call them level types, but they're basically the skills. And I also use this level type as a way to identify different UI elements. Instead of creating constants everywhere to represent all these different UI elements, I just do it in a consistent way that I can use later. Sort of implicit as I'm deriving these, but I think it's okay. It's very verbose to make this all explicit and have a huge table of names and all that. Just seems to be kind of wasteful. Once the rows are all created with all their default values, I then need to wire up the way that the synchronization will happen. So in this case, some of these are pretty straightforward. So I end up grabbing these mutable references to some of the text-based UI elements to update the XP or the level, which you've seen in the previous part of this video. And then again, you can see this naming convention here, which is pretty convenient. And then the more tricky part of this is how do I get the progress bar to work? Because currently I don't have a UI element that's really specifically a progress bar, which maybe in the future I'll do that. But what I do now is I create a background tile, and a tile is just basically it's a quad that you can add a texture to. I create a background tile and I create let's call it the colored tile. And basically I calculate, right here you can see the percent of the background size given the experience that is left for the level. So it's like if you're halfway through the level, then this would be 0.5, and then you would end up with half the background size being needed. And then it's just a simple calculation to essentially set the screen space coordinate of the colored tile based on the background tile. Normally when we create UI elements, it's all relative to its parent, but these both share the same parent, so it's a little bit more tricky. So what I do is basically I take the all the way right coordinate for the background, and then I subtract the background size, basically zeroing it out for the most part, and then I add back that percent background size. So again, if the experience level, which you can see we calculate that here, if it's halfway through, this size would be half of the background, and since we've zeroed it out with this piece here, it will simply add back that half size, giving the colored portion to be filled halfway, if that makes sense. And I think this works fairly well. I could simplify this in the future, but I think, yeah, it's fine. And to actually get this data, the way that it works is I have a level system. There's a bunch of systems if you've seen other videos, and this is just another one. And essentially it goes through the snapshot that comes from the server, it goes through the levels, and it figures out if the data state is changed or not. And then the UI code will actually fire different functions depending on if they have changed or not. So as it comes to the server, this will all get set up, whether the data is changed or is the same, and then the UI will trigger updates and synchronize that way. So the next part is the server-side code, and there's a couple interesting parts. I won't show everything because there's quite a lot of code for just handling new information being passed between fiddlers, such as the player's experience and weapon statistics and all that good stuff. So this piece here is part of the state machine that runs when user input comes in. So essentially now I've added a way to incorporate the weapons and determine what state needs to be transitioned to based on the weapon. So here we just pick the weapon that's equipped, if any, and based on the weapon type, we run the different transition into the state, which handles the animation and all that good stuff. And if there's nothing, we can see the punch. The next piece is when damage is applied, we need to grant experience to the player. So I do that with a experience table, or at least I pick the level based on the experience table. So this is pretty simple. I know other games are quite sophisticated when it comes to figuring out what experience maps to what level, but I did it in a pretty simple way, which is I basically created a table up to level 100, and I basically increased the amount of experience needed between levels by 3%. So I think that works okay. Right now the base or the first level is 20 experience, but in the future it'll probably be around 100. So that seems to scale fairly well. And the final change here is actually if we look at how the damage is calculated, and this in the future will change, but I try to make something that's pretty simple to understand. And essentially what we do is we get the weapon stats, and the way that I handle it now is, let's say we're talking about strength. Every 3 strength levels on a weapon is 1 more max damage, and every 3 strength levels as part of the player is another max damage. So you can see I add these two together and I divide by 3 to get the max damage for the weapon and the player level, or player strength level I should say, and I subtract that from the defense level divided by 5, which means every 5 defense levels reduces the max damage by 1. And in the future, there will be armor and other different ways to incorporate scales to increase the max damage or decrease the max damage. So this function will definitely be getting more attention. It'll definitely be a hot point in the code. But for now, I thought this equation was pretty simple. And then the final thing is I add a little variance. So instead of swinging your sword and hitting, let's say, calculates to 8 damage, hitting an 8 every time, there's a 20% variance from 8 and 20% below that. So I think that is nice. It kind of adds some wiggle to the damage, if you will. So anyways, this is it for the code, and I'll be working on the next devlog. Probably will come out towards the end of summer. So thank you for watching.